Welcome back, everybody. It's Monday night. We are officially into March. You know, it's nearly the end of winter, beginning of spring, at least for us here in the Midwest, when Sunday we had 65, today we had 31. Doesn't make any sense. It's that time of year. We are back with another fun evening talking rookies as well as some actual IDP news. We are 2 weeks and a day away from the official tampering period. Free agency's around the corner. I mean, we're getting there. It's a fun time of year, at least in the off season. So we'll see what we can do to have some fun tonight. We're going to talk some good stuff and have a good time and answer your questions as always. Before we get to introductions and all the good stuff, don't forget RotoHeat.com, RookieDraftGuide.com. If you are watching this live or even after the fact, like, subscribe, notification icon, do all the things you're supposed to do to show YouTube that you love us, and you do love us. Even with Paul here, you love us. So welcome back, everybody. Kraig, how you doing tonight, sir?
For those of you that paid attention back to, 18 and a half years ago, when Flash was a big thing on the internet for cartoons, if you ever watched Homestar Runner website and watched Strong Bad Emails, in the words of Strong Bad himself, boy, is it ever Monday. But we made it through the day, and we're here doing this, and like Brad said, we're here to have some fun, talk some IDP football. Let's just spread the love and ignore the hate. There's too much of it online these days. Too many people just fighting over dumb stuff. Let's be kind. Let's watch out for each other and try to win some fantasy football. How are you doing, Paul?
I'm gonna yell about dumb stuff because Monday's horrible and I can't get my notes to load here. So we're going off of memory, which is
sketchy at best.
It's always interesting. If you guys follow us on the chat, it was a fun weekend. I picked up a couple things that I wanted, but looking forward to this weekend and looking forward to discussing fantasy football. Hopefully with some notes that internet can start working whenever it wants to now.
Right. Yeah.
Brad, how are you?
It was Monday. It was a busy Monday. Funny side note, Kraig, with Strong Bad. I couldn't remember what it was for the longest time, and then in my day job, obviously I'm a project manager in IT, and when we used to be in the office every day, a guy had printed off that picture of the little like wrestler Strong Bad logo thing, and wrote Strong Brad on there and put it on my office, and I had no idea what they were talking about for the longest time, and they would always just say they're like Strong Brad, and I'm like, what the hell are you guys talking about? It was a running joke for a while, and then I had no clue. And they're like, don't you remember? And they said, 15, 16 years ago, the commercial. I'm like, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. So that's funny you brought that up. That made me think of work, which I hate you for that. I left work. I don't want to be back there.
Love you too.
So we said we had some fun things other than rookies to talk about. Obviously, unless you've been under a rock, J.J. Watt is now at least shown on the internet that he's chosen a team. Obviously, I have not seen official numbers come through, so I'm not sure the signing is truly official, but in the mind of J.J. Watt and his Arizona Cardinals t-shirt on the internet, it is official. He is now a member of the Cardinals, which appears to mean that Hassan Reddick is not going to be an Arizona Cardinal, which, whatever. It is what it is. Gentlemen, I'll start with you, Paul. How do you feel about Watt to an already aging defensive linebacker core? Well, I say aging. It's more like Chandler Jones and Devon Kennard are older, and then the rest are younger. How do you feel about it?
I think if he can stay healthy along with Jones on the other side, I think they're super scary because they have a lot of the other pieces, but they don't have a consistent pass rush, and he really helps with it. I know that, he's just old and he gets hurt. Yeah, but when he's on the field, he gets home. I think I saw something where he got pressure on like 31% of snaps. That's high. And if you don't have Jones on the other side, who basically hasn't had any help since he was in New England, look out. If they can stay healthy, look out.
How about you, Kraig?
Kraig, how do you feel?
Yeah, like we've mentioned, like last offseason, the health thing is going to be the issue for Watt. And last year he was able to stay healthy for the most part. I don't recall offhand, but I don't think he missed any significant amount of time really. And the problem that he had in Houston was, he was the guy. They had a few other guys here and there that would get pressure, but by and large, it was just him. And if you double him, take him out of it, you'll let, Whitney Merciless or someone else go after the quarterback as opposed to Watt. So having other pass rushers, people that can get to the quarterback, even if they're not a true pass rusher, quote unquote, like Chandler Jones, is going to be helpful. It can also help the growth of a younger guy like Isaiah Simmons, who we didn't see a whole lot of, but another smart NFL player like Watt to learn from and get that knowledge from as he's growing. Hopefully that's going to do good things for him. And if they're healthy, I mean, it's going to be a defense to be reckoned with. So I like the move for Arizona. The money doesn't seem crazy to me, given that it's just a 2-year deal from what the information out there is that we have. So if he does bust, it's not going to destroy the team for a long period of time, and a better defense should help that offense too.
I do now that you're saying that I do. I'm digging into Spot Track right now, and I do see it's a 2-year, $31 million deal with 23 million guaranteed. So not long, a lot of it up front. So that should still allow them to try to make some other moves. I mean, and I think you had said pre-show, Craig, that, or maybe even Paul, they said, you could always cut a few guys, the Rob Alfords of the world and save some money. So if they did need to do some other things on that defense outside of the draft, there's a few contracts they could deal with and get rid of that wouldn't kill them.
I think it also says that Reddick is maybe asking for too much, and they just simply said, "Hey, we'll take Watt and worry about this other situation later." I also think it says, "Hey, we can win now with DeAndre Hopkins and Hicks and some of these other options that we have. We don't have many more seasons out of Jones on the other side. Let's go ahead and throw everything at it and see what happens."
And Rick over on YouTube, I obviously bought a J.J. Watt Houston jersey last year. Facepalm emoji.
The other thing that with this, though, I mean, if we're talking about cutting Alford and that, okay, so a good pass rush can make up for issues in your secondary, but they're getting thin right there. Like if they cut Alford, Peterson's a free agent. Whether or not they bring him back or they cut him or something to that effect, I don't remember the exact result of it. But he's currently not on the team. You have Murphy, Baker, and not a whole lot else back there in that secondary. So that is going to be something they're going to have to address. Whether Peterson decides he wants to come back to stay with the team that he's been on and try to get to the Super Bowl or whatever, but it helps them up front, but on the back end, if they start cutting other guys like that to make up for that cap, it could cause some problems too. So it's something to bear watching.
Well, and the nice thing for them, if they want to start moving younger, this is a good draft to go younger at corner. With Farley's
Yeah.
and J.C. Horns and Surtains, however they fall out, they could probably at 16 still get one of the top three-ish corners, I would think. Obviously, I
Yeah.
haven't really projected in my mind who I think goes there, but I think Dallas and Arizona are the two teams that I would think probably go defense and potentially corner. Interestingly enough, with J.J. Watt, though, he played 16 games last year. He was healthy for the most part, but really he's had 3 seasons where he's missed significant time. And obviously, they've been 3 of the last 5, so people are really concerned about that. But before that, I mean, from 2011 to 2015, I'm looking at his game stats. The dude's played 16 games each of those first 5 years, and then 2 of the last 5 years, he's only played 2 full seasons. So, depending on which version of Watt you're getting, if you get healthy, like Paul said, paired with Chandler Jones, I mean, that's a really solid front attack, and it really depends. I mean, Spot Track has him listed as a defensive end, so if he's more like on the line and not kind of a stand up edge rusher, and they use him more on the line, I think that would be better for him. And I think that would be better if they do decide to go younger in the secondary. Maybe Isaiah Simmons winds up playing more full time safety with a sprinkled in linebacker time. I mean, there's a lot of things they can do to help these young secondary and the young pieces that they've been adding in the defense, with an addition of a guy like J.J. Watt, because he can get to the quarterback quickly for the most part. him and Chandler Jones can get there quick and really cause some disruption. And I think for those on the fantasy side of things, I'm still a buyer for J.J. Watt if he's cheap or free or next to nothing, I should say. I'm not paying a premium price to get J.J. Watt just because he went to Arizona. I've had a few people direct or DM me today about going and getting him. I'm not chasing after him unless it's a super cheap deal. I'm just not. I mean, there's other options out there. So, what do you guys think from the fantasy perspective? Are you buyers on them? Are you going after them? Or are you just going to let somebody else deal with that? Kraig?
If you're a contender and you have a weakness and he's going to continue to be a defensive end or defensive line guy, which I think he will for designations this year, I'd be fine giving a back end, in a 12-team league second, because I think that's where you're sort of where we talked about last week. Even those IDP guys start to go in a league like this, as far as your top defensive ends for the young guys go at the start of the second. If you're in contention, you probably have a back end ish second as is. And if you really feel that's a weakness, I'd find shoring it up in a title run as opposed to trying to get a younger guy who may or may not produce for you this year.
What about you, Paulie?
Paul?
Similar. I think I would hold off until week 6 or 8 and see if they stay healthy, and if by week 6 or week 8 you know that you're in the hunt, that's when you make your move. I can't see anyone who finds themselves 1-5, 2-5-ish range holding out for more when they know that they're looking at 31-year-old defensive ends. I would actually prefer Jones, but it depends on your scoring format. Is it more sack heavy or solo heavy? But I think that Jones is going to finally see single up coverage, if you will, and he could have a monster season. Also, I think that this helps Isaiah Simmons, which also falls into that talent over situation, because situation eventually changes. And if they're going to spend a bunch of money for Watt, I don't see how he doesn't see 90% at least of the snaps next year. Now, what spot he sees them at, okay, we can discuss that, but ultimately Simmons is someone that's immediately looking at a sky-high ceiling just because there's so much in front of him, and snaps just opened up because they don't have any option on re-signing Reddick at all.
Yeah. It's a good. I think it's a good move if you're going to target anyone out of this trade, it would be Isaiah Simmons. Obviously, I've got Budda Baker shares, and I'm loving this as well. I think that helps really anybody in the secondary that gets significant playing time. So I would be happy with going after some of those other pieces for sure. All right, so that's that. That's the big piece of IDP news for the night. Let's get to the meat of it. Let's talk rookies. If you've been following us recently, we've been trying to outline rookies that we like. We've talked about defensive linemen and edge guys and things like that. So if you haven't got to check out any of the other episodes, make sure you go back and watch them. They're still relevant until we say otherwise. So tonight we're talking linebackers. Kraig, I'll let you start us off because I know you've done a good job prepping. I know in the chat this morning you actually had a list, or maybe it was last night, of guys that you wanted to talk about. And we'll start with you, and then we'll just kind of work off of that. I know I have a few guys that you didn't mention in your list that I wouldn't mind bringing up. But right now, again, we're still pre-draft, so we don't know where these guys are going. These are just based off of skill, talent, maybe our thoughts on potential situation. So start us off, Kraig, and we'll follow you.
Well, if you've checked out RookieDraftGuide.com today, you'll notice Sage Sharat, and we had a video post about him. Those are on the website, and we are going to talk about Surratt, but not Sage. I'm going to bring up his brother, Chaz. He is one of the guys that I'm really intrigued by, that he is not a fully formed product, if you will. He's still learning it. He was a converted quarterback, and he is extremely athletic. He's got that intellect and ability to see things and diagnose them, but um, he's still learning the position, quite frankly. And it's really that sort of athletic upside that we see all the time in the NFL draft that teams fall in love with. That I think they're going to fall in love with him. They're going to make him pick within the first 2 days of the draft, and he even has the potential to be a day one pick, depending on how things pan out here. He's got to get better at diagnosing things that I have on here, but um, strength is another thing. He's going to have to improve because he wasn't built to be a linebacker originally. He's getting into his frame, so that limits him in the run defense a bit. But if you're talking about today's modern NFL, he has the athletic ability to be out in coverage. He has that quarterback mentality still where, he can sort of understand what is developing and where to go. So I think the rest of it will come, and I'm really excited to see what he brings to the table in the NFL. And I might be sacrilege for you offensive folks, but I like him as a prospect on IDP better than I do his brother at wide receiver. So that's my thoughts on that. Not that we're here for my wide receiver thoughts. How do you feel, Paul?
The exact same. This is also going to sound completely random to anyone else, but Kraig and I are actual. We have a real life friend that's the best chess player in Wisconsin. Chaz Sarat, if he doesn't make the NFL, he can legit play. I found that was just random and very interesting. But I feel the same way. He does have some mental issues, but I can explain them with he hasn't seen the field on the defensive side since like high school. Um, yeah, I feel that the frame, the speed, and just he will put his nose in the middle of it and make a bunch of tackles. It's just I don't think he ends up in the first round, but it wouldn't surprise me if he runs a fast 40, which I know we're all in the 40's overrated. Yeah. Okay, I get it, but if he can show that he's got that he's here now, it reminds me of everyone watching Queen last year and saying, "Okay, I see that he's behind it, but he's super young, at least in Surratt's at the position, and they look in the future. And if he can show the combine numbers, yeah, I'm behind this one 100%.
Yeah, I in this draft season, I think a lot of those numbers are going to be inflated or overrated because these are all basically pro day type things, and you're not getting a true combine where you have that group of people and doing it that way. So I'm really a lot of these numbers are suspect for me. I'm struggling with how to judge them based on what could be, because I mean when you think about a lot of the guys that have been going at Exos, they're all running extremely fast 40 times down there. I mean, you're hearing about Rondale Moore and some of these guys just blazing fast, which they're fast, but it might be a little inflated going into draft season. So I try to steer clear of that. And with the prep I've been doing this off season for guys, especially guys like Chaz Sarat, I've been trying to. I try to look for did he develop and grow and mature in his position from year to year. He's only really had 2 years in college, and I saw that. When he came back and he was playing this last season, he looked better with his angles for tackling. He looked better when he was trying to tackle. He looked better like he had stepped up the mental side of it, like he was working and studying and preparing. I mean, like that's what I want to see with a guy that has a lot of question marks. He came to UNC to play quarterback, was terrible, and they moved him to linebacker. Like, show me something, and he has. He looks like somebody who's really trying to develop. And you talking about his chess game tells me, okay, he's a smart dude. Chess is one of those games that takes a lot of. I mean, you have to think steps and steps ahead to really be ahead of your opponent. So that's an intriguing prospect. High character guy from everything that I've read. Watching the film, he's working and developing and growing. Like that works for me. He's a guy that if I'm in an IDP draft, I'm looking to stash him because I don't see him as a day one pick. He's probably a solid day two pick, would be my guess. Mid second round for a team that needs a linebacker wouldn't be out of the question, I would think. And it's only because he hasn't had a lot of time and at college in the position. That would be where I would think teams would kind of, especially in this draft when you don't get so much face to face time with a player. Like I would think a lot of these guys that are borderline would slip for that, but maybe I'm wrong. I think Surratt's definitely a guy to target though. If you're looking to stash somebody in a deeper league on a taxi squad, I would be fine with that. If it's a pretty standard IDP where you're only starting like one at each position in a flex, he might not get drafted. So just be mindful there.
Yeah, I mean the thing about the 40s, like Paul is saying, and we've been talking about over in Discord about people are going to be moving. It's all over Twitter to the GPS tracking sort of stuff too. But there is still some of that. When you're looking at game film, not go down the rabbit hole that I always do, but like the Supreme Court said about obscenity in the 1960s. I know it when I see it. Some of these guys, you can see them on the field, and they have that game speed. Even if they don't run the perfect 40 when they don't have pads on, and it's that one or three runs or whatever they get, and they screw it up that day, or they had a bad meal the night before. Some of these guys, you just know when you see them on the field that they have that game speed, and that aspect of it isn't going to be an issue for him. And he's one of them. For me, that the athletic profile and the speed are just there for today's NFL. That I don't have a question about that part of it, regardless of what his 40 ends up being.
Absolutely.
Thanks for coming to my TED Talk on the Supreme Court tonight. Anyway, Paul, moving on to another linebacker.
Our legal counsel rests.
All right, let's hit somebody who I'm not sure if someone who I have seen it and I don't know if it's obscene or not. Let's go with Zaven Collins. Tulsa, 6'4", 260. I say 60 with a question mark because I'm not sure. He might be lighter than that. I actually hope that he is so that he can slide inside. I'm a little concerned about the speed, and I was really hoping that he was going to have a fourth season there, just so he could match the 4-for-4 that Nanny Hazel hit in the 1940s when that Tulsa resident went 4-for-4 on killing her husband. You get one. I'm going to sneak it in every show.
That was a reach. That wasn't your best work, Paul. It took you a while to get there.
Correct.
They're not all first-round picks, Brad.
Yeah, they're not all first. This guy's looking in like the second, third, or fourth.
That was a Jordan Love move on your part.
That was a 6-rounder.
Lions fans don't need to be talking about draft picks.
Thanks for saving me, Kraig. Anyways, if he's in a 4-3, they probably stick him at Sam, which maybe for fantasy. If he's in a 3-4, I'm a little concerned he doesn't get the overall tackles either. But from like an actual football perspective, he's the best athlete out there, which I know for Tulsa is meh. But if he can run 4.60 with his size and what you can see, like the hand usage, the getting through the line, I'm interested. Like I said, if it's a fantasy aspect, I have to see landing spot, but we also hit on the big names a couple weeks ago, so we're kind of on the not so obvious as is. But I like the height, weight, speed out of him, especially if he can back it up at, even if it is Exos or whatever it is. I guess how did you guys feel about him?
Counselor, would you like to go first?
I think he's a first-round pick in the NFL draft. I mean, with what he put on tape, and we're going to see what the measurements and all that sort of stuff. But I would be shocked right now if he wasn't a first round pick in the NFL. And I think his speed is the concern if you have one about him. But he's a guy that's shown that he can get out there and play. He's a smart player. He's got, good size for the NFL. I don't really have concerns that he's going to be productive in the NFL. He's a little bit heavier than a guy and slower but he has that sort of profile of a guy like TJ Watt. No, that doesn't mean I'm saying he's going to be the next TJ Watt. Don't be going down that rabbit hole. But, a lot of people were surprised with where he got taken in the NFL draft. I think it's a similar sort of situation. I think in that same sort of role, he could be very productive. He's got the power, he's got the strength, and he's got that mindset of getting to the quarterback and owning that. I think he's going to do just fine. Which, to me, especially if you're playing in an edge position, I think he's a great guy to pick up in the draft. Brad?
Yeah, I mean, he's in, for being a guy from Tulsa, he's in some pretty interesting company. As a Bronco Nagurski Trophy winner, I pulled up the list of prior award winners. Chase Young, Josh Allen, Bradley Chubb, Jonathan Allen, Aaron Donald, Luke Kuechly, Brian Orakpo, Ndamukong Suh. I mean, typically a guy is not winning that award that's just some scrub off the street. So obviously, that's just one part of the total package. The thing I really like about Collins as I watched him is at his size, how I guess the best word is how fluid of a rusher he is, as the way that he uses his body, how much control he has over. He doesn't seem reckless with the way that he attacks the opposing players. I thought he did a good job of developing as a better tackler. I thought early on that some of the film that I watched, I thought he was kind of sloppy with tackling. He didn't finish very well. And sometimes he would lose tackles that way, but he really got much better at that. I mean, this is another guy like Chaz Sarat. I kept wanting to say Sage. Chaz Sarat, that I saw development. Obviously, Collins has much more production. He won an award for his abilities. Yeah. So there's a difference between the two there. But I think I like him better in. I like your TJ Watt, not the comp, but I like that situation, I think, better for him if he gets that ability to really attack, because I think he could be good getting to the quarterback at the next level. But it's still too early to tell. He could be the next, TJ Watt, or it could be the next Anthony Barr. I mean, that's just kind of, his size. And if he gets stuck in a 4-3 in the wrong position, it's just going to kill him.
Yeah.
But I like the player a lot. I think he's got a really good ceiling if he's put in the right situation.
I wish he had one position that you could say, okay, you're 3-4 edge, or hey, you're a 4-3 Sam and you're 245, but we don't know what position he is, and that's a little scary. One of the things I did like, though, was the fact that out of high school, he was not recruited, which basically means that he got the growth spurt after everyone else, which means he might not be fully developed yet, which means he might be even more of a beast than what we think he is. And that's sky-high ceiling upside. Like I said, if he gets the speed with it, but those were things I noticed about him also.
Yeah. With today's NFL, there isn't, if you look at playing time and splits and that sort of stuff, you aren't seeing as much of these guys just being, all right, you're this 4-3 outside linebacker, that's solely what you're playing. These guys move around a lot. You're seeing guys, on the line, off the line, dropping into zone or something like that. And you really do have to be able to do a whole bunch of different things. And to me, his pass rushing is his best attribute, which is great for fantasy. But I saw enough out of him doing other things that I don't think he's just being set up to fail unless he gets thrown into just a terrible situation where, yes, they stuck him at the Brad named Anthony Barr position, and it's mediocre fantasy production. Like that, it's not really worth it to go and use a draft pick on him or something.
True story.
You're up, Brad.
Yeah. So I'm going to go with a guy that this is a super boom bust prospect. Um, I would say LSU linebacker Jabril Cox, but I think he spent more time in Dakota, North Dakota. The thing I like about him is I think for what the NFL wants some linebackers to do with their coverage skills, I think he has the athletic ability to do that. This guy is super raw, but he was a super productive high school player. Played basketball, football, but didn't do anything at the college level that really wows you. Like I didn't see anything where I was like, dude, this guy's going to be a super productive NFL player. But he's got the physical attributes. If he could just get with the right coaching, I think he could develop into something. Um, Obviously, this would be a guy that's not getting drafted in fantasy drafts. He's probably one of those super deep leagues. You stash him maybe. Otherwise, you leave him on the waiver wire. But he's a guy that I like the skill set. I think he's like 6'3", like 240-ish. Good size, good speed. The athletic profile is really where I'm hanging my intrigue at with him. And he has that ability to, I think, fall back into coverage and do some things with as much as the league is passing nowadays. I like the potential, but it's going to take time for him to develop. Kraig.
Yeah, I mean the first thing that I have just written down about him is inconsistent, which I mean you basically nailed it, and it's that he's got the athletic profile, which is great, but at the same time, if you can't put it on the field, it doesn't do you any good. And I do like him better in coverage. That is helpful, but if you're going to be a linebacker in today's NFL, that whole part of stopping the run and most of these guys getting to the quarterback, that isn't going away. And I just didn't see enough out of him consistently to make me think that I'm even going to be looking to pick him up and stash him somewhere. Um, I like him better than some of the other guys that we looked at, and I think a large part of it is just because of that athletic profile and background, coming out of high school. But man, just not enough on the field to make me feel great about picking him up somewhere. Paul?
If he's super cheap at the end, maybe, but there's probably 4 or 5 inside backers who I like ahead of him. But if it's week 5 and the wrong ACLs happen and he's on the field, okay. I mean, I saw consistency issues also when he was at the former school NDSU. You could see that he was obviously the best athlete out there, and then he goes out to LSU and he looks like, despite the fact that he's a senior heading over, he looked clueless. So you're just hoping that he sees the field, but I'd rather have others ahead of him. So
Yeah, I mean he's going to get a shot with some sort of team just based on that athletic profile. We see guys, go at the end of the drafts, the real NFL draft, all the time. But I honestly think he's a guy that unless he goes to the perfect situation, like Brad mentioned, and he really gets coached up, assuming they're able to have some sort of, actual rookie camps and things like that this year, you're probably going to be able to get him free after this following year or towards the end of 2021 if you start to see some stuff. Pick him up free 99, as Paul says, put him on your team then, and then, wait another year to see. But he's one of those guys that, unless you're in the deepest leagues, I don't think you're going to need to waste any sort of pick or even have him on your team for most of the year.
There you go. All right, Kraig, back to you, buddy.
We talked about this guy a little bit, but it bears repeating. And no, you're not in a time machine. We're not going back to the 1980s in the air tonight. But we talked about Collins, and we're going to be talking. I see that look, Brad. You always give it. You know what's coming here. We're talking about Bolton next. Nick Bolton. I know we talked a little bit about him, but he's the guy that he is somewhat polarizing, but he is sort of that throwback linebacker that just knows how to thump. He improved as he played in college, and what else we got here? The biggest thing that coverage I think will be a question for him. But if you have him as like a Mike linebacker in the middle of your team, I think he can really play that well. And there's a number of teams towards the end of the first round that could use someone like that. So I fully expect him to be a first round pick in this year's draft. and someone that could be immediately IDP relevant for you guys. Outside of Parsons, which we talked about a few weeks ago, there's a good chance he's the next guy taken in the real NFL draft, also in your fantasy leagues. So, Bolton and Collins for you tonight, Brad. How you feel about them?
Oh boy.
Well, when a Kraig loves a Bolton, I guess we'll just talk about him. He's my second favorite linebacker in the class. I like his style. I like his tackling ability. I would love to see him in a 3-4 next to Devin Bush in Pittsburgh. I think that would be a sweet grouping because that would be just like thunder and thunder. I mean, those guys would just be taking people and ripping them in half. That would be fun to watch. But yeah, he definitely, in my mind, he definitely projects as a Mike at the next level. So he would definitely be a Michael Bolton, if you will. Mike Backer, in my mind, would be his best position. I think the best thing about him isn't even the tackling ability. It's the between the ears. Like, he's a really smart linebacker. The more I watched this film, the more you could see that he was really diagnosing the play as it was happening. You could tell it wasn't like he was just kind of going with the flow and following the play. Like, he really would see cutbacks and do some of those things where you just know that he gets it. So I'm a big fan. If Micah Parsons isn't in this class, he's the best linebacker in it. But Micah Parsons is just kind of a head above the rest, and Bolton's right there under them, though. Paul, what do you think?
I think from a fantasy perspective, he's got a super high floor. From an actual football perspective, I'm concerned about the speed. He's another one of those exos that I'm interested in. I just want to see how fast he is, because I know everything else is solid. I think you hit it on the head with the smarts. Um, I know that there is concerned about his coverage skills. I'm not as concerned at all about that. I saw somebody who had their head on a swivel and was sitting there going, "Okay, he's the guy who's open. I should flow over here." And I saw that as someone really smart. But yeah, he's my second as well for this year, besides the alpha male Parsons there.
Yep.
And Brad, the last Thunder and Lightning that I know of was Tiki Barber and Ron Dane. So I hope it doesn't end up being Ron Dane and Ron Dane at linebacker, because Ron Dane at running back didn't do well for the Giants. I don't know that he would have done a lot better at linebacker.
He had the size of a linebacker. He probably should have played over there.
I don't even know if he had speed for the NFL back then to be a linebacker, much less now. So,
all right, Paul, who's next up for you?
Um, I'll head with the upside, but they don't have the floor either. Pete Warner from Overrated State. When he came in, he had the I think he was a top 150 athlete there, and he played all 4 seasons. He just looks like someone who's going to get lots of tackles for you. I'm concerned that he's got a slow mental side for it, but once he hits it, or once he sees what's happening, he gets home. But he just takes a long time in seeing, okay, the play's heading over here, and I have to react. That was my concern with him. And in the NFL, hundredths of seconds mean everything. So, but if he ends up in a spot where they invest in him, he might end up in the second, and he might be someone firmly on the fantasy radar fast. So how did you guys feel about him?
Yeah. My team has had a history of Sam linebackers that are suspect in coverage that just get eaten up by a team. Um, when I watch him, that's my concern, is that he'll be a first and second down linebacker, but as soon as they ask him to be in coverage, he's going to be capable but not great at it. I definitely think he's a good tackler. I saw the mental stuff that you're talking about. I think he does a good job as they got him closer to the ball. I think he did a good job diagnosing things a little bit faster. But when he was in coverage, I mean that's the biggest concern for me. It's just the whole coverage game for him. I definitely love the size. I think if he goes to a 4-3 defense, then he's probably a Sam. I think he would do a fine job there and get you fantasy production. He get you the tackles because that is not a problem. Like he's very good at wrapping up and bringing the ball carrier down. So I think there's definitely some opportunity or potential for him in the right situation. He has enough physical ability to do it. It's not like he's super slow when it comes to the actual physical speed. Obviously I don't know his 40 time or anything, but I think he's more than capable there. Uh, that's really all my notes have. Suspect in coverage was the biggest concern I had. What about you, Craig?
Yeah, he just didn't excite me. You know, we talked about that whole, or at least I keep harping on every week. It seems the interchangeability in the NFL with these positions on the defensive side to match up with, linebacker or excuse me, tight end, wide receiver, running back at different times, rushing the quarterback. I just feel like like you said, as far as going after the ball carrier, tackling that sort of stuff, he's got that down, and he was acceptable in coverage in college, but it didn't feel to me, if you want to go back to the note when I see it, that it's going to be that same way in the NFL. If I was going to be, throwing a dart at one of the two Ohio State guys, and I'll bring up the other one quickly, Baron Browning, I would rather throw my dart at Browning just because he has that pedigree and athletic ability and that sort of skill set that you can see, all right, he's going to be able to keep up athletically in the NFL. There's other concerns with him, but I also think Browning's going to be cheaper in most of your drafts, closer to that free 99. Depending on where he goes in the real draft, compared to Pete Werner, that I'd rather wait and take a dart throw on Browning and stash him when I know that I like the athletic profile better.
Yeah, he just needs to be coached up. I mean, he obviously OSU has not done their linebackers any justice over the last few years,
Yeah.
but he's got all the physical tools, absolutely.
Browning, I felt the same on. He's a heck of an athlete, but mentally, he puts himself in the wrong spot a lot on the field. I just also, if you're gonna have that as your profile, he's not gonna have the 4.4 speed either. I would rather have the floor of Warner versus hoping that Browning figures it out. However, if he does hit, yes, he's got a much higher ceiling. I don't think he's gonna hit it.
Well, I'm just talking draft capital wise. I think you're going to have to pay more in a draft to get Warner, probably because he gets drafted earlier. And if I'm not completely sure on either one of them, give me the higher ceiling guy later in the draft for cheaper. Is just the way I was looking at it. So
I'll get behind that philosophy.
All right, so my next one, I'm going to go with a softball. Was a guy that everybody expected to be the top linebacker in the class. Really since coming out of high school, everybody kind of anointed this guy like the next great linebacker, and he wasn't terrible, but he just never met the expectations. And that Dylan Moses, linebacker, Alabama. He's a really good tackler. He was used across the formation in all three linebacker spots. He's got the IQ to do it, but he was never picked as a captain. He doesn't have the leadership or some of those intangibles that you would expect from maybe your Mike linebacker that kind of calls the defensive plays and puts everybody in position. He's not great, like some of these guys we just talked about. He's not great in coverage. And I don't know if athletically he could really get any better at coverage. I think he's kind of what he is in coverage, but he's a good tackler. I think he would still give you fantasy relevance if he was used more as a first and second down guy, and they subbed in somebody else to handle covering those tight ends or those speedier guys. I don't know that I'm super excited about him, but I think he's good enough to be a late day two pick probably, and maybe kind of walk into a position that gets you fantasy value. But he's not a guy I'm looking to draft at any point. But he may get drafted because of the name. I mean, everybody knows Dylan Moses. What do you think, Craig?
Yeah, he's another guy that we had touched on briefly a few weeks ago, and I know I'm higher on him than you guys. It really depends on where he goes scheme wise to fit, but I think that he's going to be a fantasy starter, for fantasy anyway. How long he lasts on the NFL field, if he's able to figure it out, I personally think he was still, finding himself after injury the past year, and that stuff we know can take more than a year to get completely comfortable. How he tests is probably just because that's the world we live in with the NFL. Going to matter a lot for where he goes in drafts. If he ends up testing well or better than people think, um, teams are going to have to do that juxtaposition of looking at what he did this past year versus his pedigree, and what he did leading up to that injury. I don't think like I said, day two pick somewhere probably, but landing spot is going to be a much bigger issue for me for him than some of these other guys, just in terms of, all right, it seems like we know he can do X and Y. We don't really think he can do Z. Does that fit where he went? But if he gets to a position that he can do that at, as far as NFL team, I'd be fine taking him to be a future starter on my team. And Paul, I know you own him somewhere, and you're not high on him anymore, which is a fun position to be
Interesting.
in.
Yeah, no, it's he's a heck of an athlete. I'm concerned about the on-field skill aspect of it. Like like he uses his hands well, but it's after he gets moved off the line of scrimmage. He's got when he's in coverage, he plays it super aggressive, and he can get left behind a lot. Um, I see what you guys see about tackling, but he also gets air more often than I was hoping for out of him. Um, and that's how scores happen against him. Um, he'll be a very interesting one. I can see someone say, "Hey, we don't want you thinking out here. We're selecting you as a 3-4 end, or I'm sorry, 3-4 edge." And if that happens, he's off the fantasy radar 100%. He's just he's an interesting one. If he hits, okay. I don't see it happening. If someone is an XFL and they want him off of me, shoot me an offer. He is someone I will move.
From I think he, like we talk about in the offensive side, I think he'll be a better pro than a fantasy producer, which is why he's pretty much off my radar at least at this point, unless I see something. Unless he goes to a situation where, I mean, it just looks like there's a no-brainer that he's going to get a ton of playing time and really be in the thick of getting tackles. I mean, because I think that's kind of where he would have the best opportunity is just being a tackle, kind of a tackle hog. And truth be told, I wouldn't be upset if Detroit took him. I mean, with our need for linebacker help, his athletic ability at least would be better than, Jelani Tavai, and his still trying to get to the, I think he's about as fast as Zach Moss. So I don't know. So
I I think it's hilarious how you keep saying that Detroit needs certain
they
positions.
need every position.
Do you need the? I was gonna say you don't need certain positions in that sentence. Detroit needs.
The only thing they really
Yes.
don't need is basically from the center to the left tackle. I think they're fine at those three positions. Other than that, they can use everything.
I don't know. Paul kept telling me that Jared Davis was good there for a while. So I mean, they're set at linebacker, Brad.
The funniest thing is when you listen, I've been watching all the interviews and sitting in and listening to a lot of the conferences. They're actually really intrigued by Jared Davis. The toughest thing is Jared Davis just needs to slow down. Like the dude's always going 100 miles an hour and he misses everything. It'll be interesting to see if Aaron Glenn can, if anybody can do it, a former player who was an all pro should at least be able to give him a better opportunity to slow down and process things better. And that's what they kept saying about the entire defense. It seemed like the entire defense just was having to think too much and couldn't handle it. So I don't know. Maybe this team knows. Maybe these guys know what they're doing. I don't know. But I just don't see a lot of talent on that defensive side.
But isn't that just sort of what you described you see in Dylan Moses? I mean, that same sort of thing with Jared Davis, that, he was a name guy that, overplays at times and misses the ball care. I mean, do you need another one of those, or do you want another one of those on your team?
If they're more of a 3-4 team and they're putting him out on the edge to set the edge and go after the quarterback, okay with that.
Oh, okay.
If he crushes the pocket and really starts to speed up the quarterback and try to make that guy, get off time, I mean, that's different. Like Jared Davis doesn't have the size to be an edge rusher in a 3-4. Like he's strictly in the middle, just because he's just so. I mean, what is he like 6'1"? I mean, 6'2" maybe.
Well, they're about the same size. I mean, 2 inches of height isn't the be all end all.
Isn't Moses?
Yeah, but
go ahead, Paul.
Moses's arm length means he can sit outside.
Yeah.
Davis, he doesn't have the arm length. He's got sawed off arms. Basically, I mean, they're just short, and he'd get eaten up on the outside.
I apologize. Everyone on YouTube, fact check us on arm length. I haven't done research on arm length. I apologize. I'm not in the doctor's office with these guys.
You're an attorney, not a doctor.
I am a doctor, but not that kind of doctor.
He's a doctor attorney.
Juris Doctorate. I have a doctorate. I am a doctor. Welcome to my TED Talk. Anyway, continuing. Where are we off? Because that was one of your guys' Brad. Is it back to me?
Yes, doctor.
Another dumb joke for you to groan at. Cameron McGrone there. One of your guys, Brad.
Would it have been safe to say a dumb joke to McGrone at?
I was leaving it up to the imagination a little bit. You can't just play off the whole joke right away. Leave something to the imagination for them to process it. Especially when we have guys like Sully watching us on YouTube. Got to keep them engaged, not just throw it out there right away. Anyway, he's another guy that, and I'm sure you'll have a take on him, Brad. I really liked his athletic profile. He was able to cover tight ends and running backs enough where I think that he's going to be able to succeed in the NFL. Probably another sort of middle linebacker type position. He's not a guy that's going to be taken day one unless something crazy happens. He's probably another day two guy. He has enough speed, strength, but, size-wise, he's probably a little bit smaller than you'd want, but I think he's going to be able to still get by some of these guys just based on his athletic ability. My biggest problem for him, and this isn't a knock because I am a college football atheist. I don't subscribe to any sort of team except Hofstra, rest in peace. He just didn't have a very good team that he played with, as far as what they showed on defense, but I liked what he was able to produce while there. He has the instincts, the explosiveness. He did have, knee injury, so whether or not he's fully recovered from that, that's going to be a question for teams, and it will affect his draft stock. But even if he falls a little bit farther than we think, he is a guy that, sort of like Surratt, although I think Surratt will be drafted higher, you're going to be able to get and stash if you want to. And based on his athletic profile, he's a guy that I'm going to be looking at to do that with. We'll let Brad go last on this guy. How you feel, Paul?
He reminded me of Eric Kendricks a lot, where he's not the fastest, but he's just efficient. I noticed that also, like what you guys saw. If you were watching either Michigan or Penn State defensively this last year, good luck. You have no idea what his position is on it, or the guy right beside him, or the lineman. It's just a mess watching him, and you just hope that what you saw of him and him only shows through. I think that he's around 3 or 4 selection, and I think he plays in the middle. But again, there was no consistency on that field to say anything besides that. You don't know what he was asked or anything like that. And I don't want to sound like I'm harping on Michigan. I'll leave that to the Michigan man. Also because my team sucks as well.
Don't
and
harp
has
on
consistency
Michigan.
issues.
You don't want to harp on Michigan. You want to harball on Michigan.
I don't want to
So be around for a while,
I don't want
Brad.
to Harbaugh on anything. That guy needs to
Wow.
Harbaugh his ass out of there.
Yes, that was a stretch, but so was our one per show. So, consistency,
Yeah,
folks.
no, that all of that makes me McGrone. Um, you know,
Now you're getting it.
so the toughest thing is I think teams will have trouble projecting kind of what the ceiling can be for him, just because there's been such a small sample size. I mean, you guys talked about a lot of that, and I don't argue any of it. I think if he is going to make it at the NFL level, it's going to be a Mike linebacker, and which would be great for fantasy as well. So I think it's kind of boomer bust for him. I mean, it's boomer bust for any player, but I think for him it's either Mike linebacker or bust, because I don't know that I don't know that I've seen enough to make me think that he's really going to be great at any of the outside linebacker positions. I really think he has to be kind of stuck in the middle to use the abilities he does have. So,
Yeah.
which is fine. I mean, like at his size, he would be a really nice 4-3 middle linebacker. I mean, he's got enough athletic ability to be able to drop back in coverage. I mean, but again, small sample size, terrible coaching. Uh, well, not terrible coaching. Don Brown's not a terrible defensive coach, but I haven't seen him develop. I mean, Devin Bush, he had a dad who was just as good at coaching him up as Don Brown. So it's like I don't know that I put all that on Michigan for developing Devin Bush into the guy that he is. Uh, I think McGrone is a much different case. I don't know how much coaching he's going to need before he's ready to see the field and be significantly valuable to an NFL team or a fantasy team. But I would be excited if he went to a 4-3 team. Maybe he goes to a team that's. Uh, I could easily see him going to Seattle. Just because they kind of draft these guys that have some sort of weird concern. With him, it's he didn't play long. Jordan Brooks. Think of some of these other linebackers that they found kind of mid round. I mean, Jordan Brooks is the earliest one I can think of that they drafted, but most of these other guys they drafted later rounds and they turned out. Like I could see McGrone go there and be successful. I just don't know. I don't know that I'm putting much draft capital into him. He's a freemium guy. I think even in deeper leagues, I think he's one of those. Wait till draft is over and then you stash him.
Fair enough.
And
Yeah.
Harbaugh sucks. So that's how we're ending the show. This guy needs to stop.
Aw.
He drives me crazy. Why does he hate Michigan so much that he keep taking our money?
You keep offering it. I'd take that money too if they offered it, and I can't tell you that I'd be a better coach. So
I think you'd do fine. You'd probably do about as well as he did. If nothing else, they'd understand legalese, right?
Somewhat.
So that's it. I mean, it's 10:30. We're not gonna go much deeper into some of these prospects, but we will tell you, RookieDraftGuide.com will, because we are working through continually adding more rookies into the conversation. I have been talking to some folks that really do like what the site's looking like. So we thank you for everybody who has jumped on there and become a patron and gotten all the content and all that good stuff. We're working continuously on building more content for RotoHeat.com. Right now, you're seeing all of our top 10 series. Craig's been working on a ton of IDP top 10. I'm working on a little bit of IDP and Devi top 10. Sully and the guys are working through all sorts of would you rather type articles, kind of player versus player and other top 10s from the offensive side. So for those of you that are watching at any point, RotoHeat.com, RookieDraftGuide.com, you're going to see all of our content. Show some love. Hit the like, the subscribe, the notification icon. Hit us up on Twitter, on the Discord chat, on Facebook community. RotoHeat everywhere. We're worldwide. All right. So let's keep going, and we'll talk to you guys again Thursday. We're going to be doing some more. I think we're doing some more mock madness, but I'd have to check the show sheet. It's too early in the week to pay that much attention. So next Monday we'll be back here at 9:30 Eastern time. We'll talk to you guys again soon. As Craig said, take care of each other. It is crazy out there. We love you guys, and we'll see you again soon.